As we excuse me, as we continue to read the Word of Buddha, I think in this, especially in this section, it's really important to remember that these are. I mean, it's number one, it's a translation of what was originally said. It's also important to recognize that this was over 2,000 years ago, probably 2,500, 2,600 years ago, the way that they would have thought about reality and things. So even if you're thinking more in a scientific level in modern society, the way science tells us things, the Buddha, in the way he saw it, is actually very surprisingly accurate, considering it was over 2,000 years ago. And it's sort of philosophical, it's sort of, and it's not precisely scientific. So what I'm getting at here is it's surprisingly accurate for somebody who lived more than 2,000 years ago. Not that it's perfectly accurate or it's the way that our science currently classifies things. So this section right here seems to look at our physical reality, and with the knowledge that they had at that time, or he, the Buddha, was, and I think one of the important aspects of what he was doing was looking at reality. So I think what we do today, looking at things from a scientific perspective, is precisely what the Buddha wanted us to do. He wouldn't want us to be afraid of the truth. So this, the essence of what is being done and what is being got at by the Buddha is something that we need to do by looking at the sciences and trying to understand the way things actually are. So I'm going to read it and then see if I have a little bit of time to discuss what we're reading there. It says, and now is the group of corporeality, which basically physical realm. It is the four primary elements, and corporeality derive from them. And what are the four primary elements? They are solid element, fluid element, heating element, and the vibrating element. Another translation for the vibrating element could be windy element as well, is mentioned in a side note here. So, again, so when we see that, like these types of classifications, like very ancient philosophers had very similar classifications. When they were the way scientists thought about things 2,000 years ago in a scientific way, trying to classify things, looking at the solid, the fluid, and what they call heating and vibrating. Interesting, we do look at those as the states of matter. Everything could be either a solid, a liquid, or a gas, right? The three states of matter. And so you have the solid element, the fluid element. And they said the heating element and the vibrating element or windy element. So perhaps the vibrating or the windy is referring to the gas. Heating is perhaps referring to energy itself, the most basic form of all excuse me, of all matter. Everything is basically energy at its core. And so electromagnetism, things like that. So I could only assume that perhaps that's what's being referred to. So like I said, for somebody over 2,000 years ago, surprisingly accurate. We don't quite classify things in this way today, but looking at things in a scientific way is what I think the Buddha was getting at, is how are things actually, the reality of things. And this is just the physical reality, just simple as what is it. And you notice that a lot in Buddhism, which is why I think this is a very good interpretation of what the Buddha is doing. There's a side note here. It says the four elements, popularly called earth, water, fire, and wind, are to be understood as the elementary qualities of matter. They are named in Pali, and it gives the Pali words. I'm not even going to try to pronounce those, and may be rendered as inertia, cohesion, radiation, vibration. Another interesting take on it. Inertia, cohesion, radiation, and vibration. All four are present in every material object, though in varying degrees of strength. If, for example, the earth element predominates, the material object is called solid. The corporeality derived from the four primary elements consists, according to the Abhidhamma, of the following 24 material phenomena in qualities: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, visible form, sound, odor, taste, masculinity, femininity, vitality, physical basis of mind, gesture, speech, space, which referring to cavities like inside the ear, the nose, the mouth, decay, change, and it looks like it says nutriment. I wonder if they meant to put nutrient. I'm not sure there. Bodily impressions are not especially mentioned among these 24, as they are identical with the solid, the heating, the vibrating elements, which are cognizable through the sensation of pressure, cold, heat, pain, etc. So, and what I was trying to get at is this seems to be consistent with very common philosophies of the scientific mind. And you see this throughout Buddhism, is just trying to see things accurately as they are. So I think if the Buddha had lived in a scientific society like we have today, in the modern world, he would have picked up on the way science classifies things, because that seems to be a very consistent image of the way people classified things in the scientific mentality or philosophical mentality over 2,000 years ago. So I think he would have picked up on our current scientific classifications and just trying to see what things really are, and their an accurate understanding of just what is it. Physical objects. So when you break things down, for example, into their states of matter, solid, liquid, gas, everything is basically energy. You have your electrons, your neutrons, your protons, but even that breaks down into quarks. The protons and neutrons have various types of quarks. Photons make up what we see as visible light. Radiation, electromagnetism, different types of waves and properties. Everything is basically some sort of wave property down at its very core level. And so the essence of the scientific investigation, when we're looking at the trying to remember the word for it. It's the my brain is gone there for a second. It's the type of physics that looks at the things at the atomic level, and my brain just decided not to pull that word up. So anyway, at any rate, the point is that we're looking at the things as they really are, their essence, because why this becomes important in Buddhism is because what we're trying to do is see that nothing in itself has a self. So the same thing that makes up my body, my skin, my eyes, my heart, is the same thing that makes up tables and the earth itself, trees, cats or cars or whatever you want to take. It's the same thing. And so when you get down to it, even past the atomic level, you have protons, neutrons, and electrons. So the same thing that makes up every atom. Now, you may have a different number of protons, and so my body has hydrogen atoms that has a single proton. My body has hydrogen and oxygen mixture that creates, what we call H2O water. So there's hydrogen, there's oxygen, there's, and the oxygen, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, has 8 protons. The carbon in my body has 6 protons. So they may have different number of protons, but essentially everything has at least 1 proton, and some things have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and so on and so forth. Protons. So everything has a certain number of protons or neutrons as well, and electrons. And so, like, even if my chemical makeup, as far as the atomic level or the atoms, isn't precisely the same as the atoms used to make a car, if you break down those atoms even farther, you're still dealing with protons, electrons, and neutrons, and even farther than that, you're dealing with quarks and and wave properties. So, and energy, essentially energy. So in that sense, I am literally made of the same stuff that the car is made of, or of the concrete or grass or the dirt. Literally anything you can think of is in its essence, it's the same thing I'm made of. Okay, now each proton has maybe the same or similar composition of energy as other protons, but then once you put 2 or 3 protons together and create a specific atom, I believe the 3 protons has lithium. Well, the lithium may not be as easily found in my body at all, if any at all. I'm not sure how much lithium we would have in our bodies, if any at all. It's a metal. But we definitely have lots of hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon in our bodies. So that the atoms may be different, but they all have protons, and they all have neutrons, and they all have electrons, and that is the same whether it's my body or inanimate objects. So, and so that's really, really, really what I think is the importance of this discussion. Is what the Buddha is doing is he's looking at essentially, and he's doing it, let's say the solid element, the fluid element, the heating element, and the vibrating element, from the scientific knowledge he had at that time. But what the Buddha is getting at there is every physical object was essentially different levels of the same stuff. They just thought that stuff was different than what we think it is now. Now we're looking at protons and neutrons. Back then they were looking at the 4 elements, and depending upon how much, and the thinking back then was how much each object had of each element as changed its manifestation. So so that's basically what they get into is looking at the essence of what creates all objects. Well, every human being had the same things, essentially the same things at its essence, at its core, as inanimate objects would have. And so when you're looking for your particular self and just realizing that if you were to break me down, or to break down concrete, or to break down, like metal or wood or anything, iron, at its very core, it has the same thing that our bodies have. And so it says, what now is the solid element? The solid element may be one's own, or it may be external. And what is one's own solid element? Whatever in one's own person or body there exists of karmically acquired hardness, firmness, such as the hairs of head and body, nails, teeth, skin, flesh. So again, it's getting really into just basically the essence of each aspect of our body. And noticing here that it says karmically acquired, there is an understanding in Buddhism that everything that has accumulated into us is in some way karmically acquired. Okay. And what now is the fluid element? The fluid element may be one's own or it may be external. And what is one's own fluid element? Whatever in one's own person or body there exists of karmically acquired liquidity or fluidity, such as bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears. So again, you see the Buddha just getting into just what is it? Just a very simple, more of a scientific look at it, not insinuating that their philosophy or their science is superior to ours today, or that we should just look at this like it was some sort of divine inspiration. It's the mentality that the Buddha is using to simply say we're all the same stuff. Okay. What now is the heating element? The heating element may be one's own or may be external. And what is one's own heating element? Whatever one's own person there exists of karmically acquired heat or hotness. So this is why I think this part, the heating element, refers more to the energy, because it talks about heating or I lost my place there. One's own body is karmically acquired heat or hotness. You know, and if you've studied biology, you know ATP generates heat in the body. I believe that was adenine triphosphate, if I'm remembering correctly. That was like over 10 years ago when I studied that. And one should understand, according to reality and true wisdom, this does not belong to me. This am I not. This is not my ego. And again, and actually, I had skipped over that just quickly, trying to run through this and make this video a little bit smaller. But literally, each section says that. So the solid element, he reemphasizes, whether it's your own solid element or the external solid element. Okay, they're both merely a solid element, and one should understand according to reality and true wisdom. This does not belong to me. This am I not. Again, the Buddha is just emphasizing that this is not me. Okay, this skin is not me. Okay, when you break everything down and you realize it's all the same stuff, and you start realizing that, you know, this stuff's going to go back into the earth when I die. You know, and it's not me. Okay. And that's really important for Buddhist philosophy. So what now is a vibrating element? The vibrating element may be one's own or it may be external. And what is one's own vibrating element? What in one's own person, body there exists of karmically acquired wind or windiness, such as the upward going and downward going winds. So like when you burp or you fart is literally what he's talking about in the stomach intestines. So that's why I believe they're talking more about gas here, because like oxygen and things like that. And so the Buddha literally is thinking about, you know, like solid, liquid, gas, and then energy is when I read this, that's what I got from it. And there can be, you know, solid, liquid, and gas outside of your body, and there can be solid, liquid, and gas inside your body. There's energy outside your body, like the rays of the sun. There's energy inside my body, what's, you know, ATP to help generate motion. But at the end of the day, again, the Buddha says, this does not belong to me. This am I not, because we're looking for the self in Buddhism, realizing that there isn't a self in Buddhist philosophy. So just as one calls Hut the circumcised, or circumscribed, sorry, I said the wrong word there, circumscribed space. So just as one calls Hut the circumscribed space, which comes to be by means of wood, and rushes, reeds, and clay. Even so, we call the body the circumscribed space that comes to be by means of bones and sinews, flesh, and skin. And so this really comes together to explain really what I was getting at as far as Buddhist philosophy. What is important that all of this that makes up my body, none of it by itself constitutes me. So it's like, I think I used the example of a car. They used the example of a hut here in the word of the Buddha. Okay, so the house or the hut or your car, any individual piece isn't the car, right? So, but once you put them all together in a certain way, it becomes that object. But when you break it down, the essence of those objects, all the way down to even further in the atomic level, the protons and the neutrons, it's literally the same stuff that's in my body. So my body is the accumulation of bones and sinews and flesh and skin, but you start peeling off anyone, like if you cut off my arm, I'm still here, right? You can, burn my arm into ashes after you cut it off, and, if I survive it, I don't bleed to death. What happens is I'm still here. My arm's gone, but I'm still here. I haven't, and that arm by itself is just not me. And, one day I'm going to die. And the thing is this body's going to go back into the dirt, and it's that none of these chemicals, the things that, and these things can break down, maybe one day the sun will supernova, and some of these carbon atoms and oxygen atoms will, break apart somehow, through lots of explosions and being in stars, and form completely different elements and atoms from something that used to be in my body as an oxygen atom, combines with another atom and eventually forms an iron atom in the center of some star that's doing fusion. So the thing is it's really hard to know what each atom could eventually be a billion years from now, a trillion years from now. But what we do know is that, when we look at it philosophically and understand the essence that each atom in my body could have been a completely different atom in the past, because it's basically protons and neutrons, okay, and could be something completely different in the future, that when you start to think about break things down into their essence, and you realize that none of that stuff by itself is me, okay? So, and that's what Buddhism is getting at here. That's what the word of the Buddha is explaining. So it goes deeper than just their scientific outlook over 2,000 years ago, but what you can see in each statement is essentially true, that everything is made of the same stuff, and it's not me. And that's really what he's getting at. Now, so next time, I believe we'll just continue where we're picking up. And it looks like it says the group of feeling, the group of perception, the group of mental formation. So not sure what we're going to get out of that. It's going to be, because it's been a while since I've read this. So we'll see what we get out of that when next time comes and I make my next video.